Beloved listeners, it's Julie, and I am so happy to have you here on the You-est podcast. And I just got to tell you, you are in for such a humongous treat today. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest. Let me tell you first a little bit about Rollin McCraty, who is Ph.D. Director of Research of the HeartMath Research Center at the HeartMath Institute. He is a psycho-physiologist. Dr. McCraty's research interests include the physiology of emotions, heart-brain communication, and the global interconnectivity between people and the Earth's energetic systems. Findings from this research have been applied to the development of tools and technology to optimize individual and organizational health, performance, and quality of life. Dr. McCraty has acted as principal investigator in numerous studies examining the effects of emotions on heart-brain interactions and on autonomic, cardiovascular, hormonal, and immune system function, and outcome studies to determine the benefits of positive emotion-focused interventions and heart rhythm coherence feedback in diverse organizational, educational, and various clinical populations. Dr. Rollin McCraty has been featured in a number of documentary films such as I Am, The Truth, The Joy of Socks Move, The Power of the Heart, Solar Revolution, and The Living Matrix, among many other. We got to meet at the HeartMath Institute Summit recently in Tulum, Mexico, and I was just blown away. And so it is, without further ado, it is just such an honor to have you here, Dr. McCraty. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great to reconnect with you after all the time we spent together down at the Global Coherence event.
That was such an amazing event. And I got to tell you, so, for those that are tuning in, if you've listened at all yet, we've been talking about HeartMath. It's something that I'm very passionate about, this, as many human beings understanding the science behind heart intelligence. And maybe for those who have not yet listened to Debbie or to Howard, we could just do like a quick kind of overview of just the science behind heart intelligence. And we could start there before we dive into many other things.
Wow.
All right. Enjoy that question. That's okay. Like, tell us about the world.
Yes. So, if we're going to talk about heart intelligence, probably need to talk about some of our research if we want to ground that into intuition. Because when we talk about heart intelligence, I mean, first of all, the way I usually would describe it is you can picture heart intelligence as the flow of really intuitive information or of awareness and understanding that is our inner intuitive guidance that we experience when we are able to bring the mind emotions into alignment with the heart.
Yeah.
And I do mean this literally, and I don't necessarily mean the physical pumping heart, but although that's clearly involved in this process, but a thing we call the energetic heart as well, which is also a real structure, a real thing, and from our perspective. But this intelligence basically steps down the power of love from universal source, or our larger self, as we like to think of it here at HeartMath.
Mm-hmm.
Now some might call that their higher self or their soul or spirit. We just, to try and take any of those other connotations out of it, because we mean this literally and scientifically, our larger self, or what physicists like David Bohm would call, our undivided wholeness.
Yeah.
Right? The implicit side of things. A lot of people have talked about this same thing using different words. But basically, it's really this intelligence that we step down from this, our larger self or universal source, if you want to use that kind of a way of thinking of it, into our day-to-day life interactions in very practical and approachable ways, which really inform and give us a straighter path to unfolding our fulfillment. And I would say really unfolding who we really are, right? As we align with who we really are, past our three-dimensional, earthly experience sometimes. Or just the mind, right? So it's really about integrating the mind and heart intelligence together. It's not about it either or, right? I mean, I want a mind and a brain, and I want it to work well, right?
Yeah.
But it's really as well, I think, what our research really shows is that as we really integrate the heart intelligence in with our mind-brain levels of those types of intelligence, that the mind is actually the big winner.
Mm.
right? So it's not a competition. That's the main thing I wanted to say there. It's not heart or mind, but it's
Yep.
really the collaboration between the two. And I think ultimately, from my perspective and my own experience, Julie, as we really learn to do that and really access that deeper intuitive guidance, that heart intelligence, it is what elevates consciousness.
Mm.
Even at the mind level, so that we're able to actually flow through life, and meet the challenges with much greater, ease and grace, and a really much healthier, happier kind of experience. Anyway, so
Beautiful.
that's kind of a ramble to get us started, I guess. But,
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And one of the things, this whole idea of the U-est you, it's tapping into your higher self, your larger self, just, made up words that mean
yeah,
the same thing. And I would love to dive into, intuition. I know for you with the science behind it, the way you explained it at the summit, and we talked earlier about it, for those listening, I think I want to honor, there are many that are just kind of coming to this idea of, oh yeah, there's something else going on, that inner knowing, that sense, we're so programmed to listen to our mind and to follow, an intellect and brain. And I love what you said. It's a collaboration of both, but would just love, the
well,
work that you've done.
sure. I'll dive into some of the research here in a second that kind of supports that, what I was saying earlier,
Yep.
really. But let me ask some of the listeners to can just maybe think over the past, could even be few days, week,
Yep.
if there's been a time or a situation that came up where they were asked to do something, or were off to do something, maybe something to, I don't know, buy a new car or whatever, that that they were really into, their mind was into, but they had a deeper sense, some type of inner knowingness and sense that maybe that wasn't the right choice, right? Just to kind of ponder that, because that's really the dichotomy, if you will,
Yeah.
when I'm talking about that lack of alignment between mind and heart.
Yep.
Right? Or it could be the other way around. A lot of times we might have an interaction with somebody where we say something that we go, later that, that really wasn't probably the best way to have handled that situation, or what I said, might have hurt feelings or something. And we have that inner sense that we really ought to call them or go see them and clean that up, but we don't do it.
Yeah.
Right? We don't follow through on that. So that's another kind of example.
Mm.
And, I ask that question in a lot of audiences that I address when we're talking about the topic of intuition. And I'd say about everybody raises their hand. And so what I'm going to suggest here, Julie, is that just really this lack of alignment between that deeper part of ourself, the who we really are, right?
Yeah.
Our larger self, and our mind-based ambitions and come outs and vanities and judgments and all that, is the largest source of unrecognized stress on planet Earth.
Mm.
This is really what's eating the life force unnecessarily out of people, to put it that way. I mean, I can take that right down to biochemical language, but it's kind of keep it at a higher level of discussion here. So that's really many choice points we have. Which way do we follow?
Yeah.
And then I think that's a perfect kind of way to segue into the three types of intuition.
Yeah.
Because that's also important to understand. And so the first type, and this is all what the research, not our research, but many others as well who have looked into intuition over the many years. So there's really kind of three, I'll call them high-level subtypes or types. Okay. In the most commonly studied I call implicit knowledge or implicit learning. It's sometimes thought of. And this is what the majority got, I think back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I read about 40 books on intuition that were out there at that time. And all of them were on this type of intuition.
Mm.
And Blank was one at the time, that was kind of related to this. You might have read that.
Yep.
That was kind of popular back then.
Right.
And so implicit learning, implicit knowledge is really, it's safe for academics to study,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's why it's the most popular. I mean, not the most popular in terms of research. And this has to do with, the reason it's so safe is it's all about the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the brain is learning information or things that we forgot we learned, or we don't know we even learned sometimes. We're just watching something happen, but we're taking that information and it's getting stored away kind of in an implicit means unconscious, ultimately,
Okay.
way. So these are patterns and memories and things that are unconsciously stored away, and then we encounter something, and the brain is pattern matching to those things that got stored away unconsciously, right? And coming up with a solution or things like this. Now, it's a really important part. This is also called dual process theory in the academic world, of research on this type of intuition, which means that we have dual process, two channels that the brain works. One is this very fast, intuitive thing where we're doing this rapid pattern recognition. And then there's the other channel, is the slow channel, we call it.
Right.
Where it becomes conscious, and it takes a lot more energy and it's slower, and we think about it, and it all becomes conscious.
Right.
So this is important because it gives rise to or under things like what's sometimes called expert knowledge.
Right.
Right. So a classic example, and there are many, I just to keep it, I know we don't have a lot of time today. I don't want to go on and on too much here, but a classic example is the nurse who walks into a patient's room. Now, this is usually a nurse that's been on the job a while. She's been around the block. Right. And she goes, oh, that patient's going to code in the next hour. Right. Everybody, all hospitals know this and know who they are, right? Yeah. But if you ask her, well, how do you know that? Or him, in some cases, they usually can't begin to tell you. I just know it. Right. Right. And maybe a newer nurse that hasn't been around as long is looking at it like, how do you know that?
Right.
What do you mean? Right. So that's this example of implicit processes, right? And expert knowledge. Now, a slower version of it, but similar kind of process, is called insight, if you want to put labels on things. Okay. This tends to be, which I think everybody can relate to. We encounter a new problem, right? And we just can't figure it out. It's nothing we've had to deal with before. We're scratching our head, and we finally kind of give up on it. Right. Right. So they'll say, I'll sleep on it, those kinds of things. Right. And usually with a day or two later, while we're driving or taking a shower, completely not thinking about it, the insight pops in with a potential solution, or who we need to go talk to get a solution, some help or whatever, but some type of insightful thing. So it's the same process, it's just done slower. The brain is basically pattern, trying to look at all those unconscious stored away historical memories. Yes. Connecting the dots to give you the insight or the potential solution. Okay. Right. So that's why it's safe. It's all about the brain. And most of the work these days is people arguing, academically about what part of the brain's doing what part of the pattern matching and, all that kind of stuff. Yep. Right. Now, it is, again, it's really important, and it's an important aspect of intuition. Yeah. But the problem with it, if we have to talk about the downside, is it can be wrong. Mm-hmm. Right. It's oftentimes as much as it's right. Right. So we can, some people will make the argument, well, intuition's not always right. Well, it's not, especially this type. Right. Because the current situation may not always be relevant to or the same as the historical stored away associations and patterns that we're pattern matching to. Oh, interesting. Well said. Does it make sense? Yeah, no, this is fascinating. I'm like waiting on bated breath. I totally get it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. So then I think that's enough on that. I mean, we could go on with, a whole hour of examples, but we're going to do another interview too, if anyone's. Okay. Well, the second type in my languaging anyway, I call energetic sensitivity. Okay. Okay. Under this rubric of types of intuition. Now, would this be like an empath? I interviewed Dr. Judith Orloff. We talked about it. Okay. Great. Some people might remember that one. Empath. Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. but more specifically, it's our nervous system's ability to detect and respond to real, usually measurable, but not always, signals in the environment that our nervous system is detecting and responding to. Okay. I mean, it's also a pattern recognition thing, but we won't get into that level of technicality here. But like empaths. Right? We don't have time to go into it today, but you remember from our multi-day event down in Cancun together, we also talk about how the heart radiates a measurable magnetic field. Yeah. Right? And that we can show that we can do analysis and show that field is carrying information about us, especially our emotional state. Right. Right. So we also know, and multiple studies have now proven, right? So this isn't really it's a hypothesis, but it's got a lot of support.
Right.
That our nervous system is exquisitely tuned into the magnetic fields generated by other biological systems, people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the window effect. So that's a great example, like of empath or energetic sensitivity, right? And it's in our language, right? You probably know the term, God, and probably had the experience. You go into a room or a party or an office and you got the tension so thick in here, you could cut it with a knife.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's that energetic sensitivity.
Okay.
Or there've actually been studies done on this too that have shown this is a real effect. You might feel like you're being stared at.
Yes.
You ever had that experience? You turn around and sure enough, there's somebody over there kind of.
Yeah. The knowingness without seeing it.
Yeah, right. But the research has shown that actually is a real sensitivity. So it's in this state. Right. So the ability to, empathy would be, I put in this as well, the ability to actually detect the fields of other people's. It's kind of like your empath kind of situation there, or all this category.
Can I ask a quick question? So, because I'm remembering the heart radiating this magnetic field, would you see, where would you see the magnet, like where is the heart in the magnetic field in this type of intuition? I don't know if that makes sense, because maybe.
Well, it kind of does. Let me give you two answers. So when our own heart, every time it beats, radiates a magnetic field.
Right.
And I'm not talking an aura here. I mean, I'm not saying auras aren't real, but that's more photonic probably. The magnetic field of the heart we can measure. I know it exists because we can put a sensor out here and measure it up to 3 feet away from the body.
Amazing.
Right. And do analysis and show that it's carrying this emotional information, probably a lot more that we don't know and haven't proven yet.
Right.
So that's the same kind of magnetic field that our cell phones use to carry information from our phone to the cell tower, right? It's the magnetic field that goes through the walls.
Right.
Right. So I often say, well, it's the magnetic component. And when we use electrodes on the body to measure the electrocardiogram, we're measuring current flow, electricity.
Right.
Whenever you have current flow, you generate a magnetic field. And the magnetic field is the part that radiates external. People go, oh, that's crazy. Well, then I just ask them, well, okay, do you have a cell phone? Does it work inside of buildings?
Yeah.
Right?
Same thing.
Yeah, same thing. It's the same. Yeah.
Same thing.
Amazing. The same. It's anyway that around magnetic fields, another type of energetic sensitivity.
Right.
There are some people who are sensitive to upcoming earthquakes or other planetary stresses. So we now know on the earthquake example, that we can measure changes in the Earth's magnetic field environment prior to earthquakes.
Wow.
And it's absolutely, and we've published a number of studies, as many others have as well, showing that especially the heart is sensitive to Earth's level magnetic fields.
Beautiful.
So that's really not debatable if you are open to looking at the real data and the many studies published on it. So those are, we could talk about more examples, but you were just going to ask me something that I might have cut you off on. Do you remember what it was?
No, I was just, we can come back to it. It's interesting as you use the word, but we're getting a little off because I know there's the third kind of intuition you mentioned before about safe. And it's just, I want to come back to that, like what's safe and then what we're noticing, what you've been on the cutting edge of really researching, because I think we're bridging into something new. We can come back to that. My coaching ears, when you said safe, I'm like, that's a fascinating word to use. I think, anyhow, we can come back to that.
All right. Well, the third type, which is really the most important for our discussion here, and what I'm really talking about on heart intelligence, is what we call non-local intuition.
Yep.
So non-local kind of implies what we mean there, but these are the type of intuitions you can't explain away or round off into the other two types.
Okay.
Right. So typically they would have to do with something that's across time.
Right.
Right. Or space. If we look down here, and this is the one that we've developed many us and other labs as well have developed protocols to actually measure and prove this. So what we can do in the lab is not necessarily what it's really all about, right? But so the types of experiments we can do here is more time and space related. So kind of a great example, I think here. I'll usually ask an audience, how many of your mothers All right. And okay, all right. Have you had the experience where you just somehow know when your kids are, misbehaving or up to no good, or in harm's, especially or in harm's way?
Yeah.
And they're not in the next room, but they might be across town or even across the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So you raised your hand. Have you had that experience?
Oh my gosh. Oh, I mean, I have a pretty interesting non-local intuition, but yeah, no,
No,
absolutely.
I don't think I've ever talked to a mother who hasn't said, yes, of course I've had that experience.
Absolutely. All the time. All the time.
Right. And if there aren't a lot of mothers, if there's younger populations, they raise their hand and said, well, I'm on the other end of that. Somehow she always knows.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
that's right.
So that would be a type of non-local intuition. And this happens too often, and it's right too much of the time to just write off as coincidence.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, I won't go into studies around that, but so that would be one kind of example. So I usually would ask the audience members to share some, those types. And it's interesting, the various experiences of this type of intuition that people share.
Hmm.
It's not just about mothers and kids. It's
Right.
I had the honor of developing, we did the pre-deployment resilience training program for the U.S. Navy.
Oh, wow.
And I was personally involved in training about 5,000 men and women, sailors in that time period. And
Wow.
in fact, the intuition part of the training was one that I was originally a little bit nervous about. They're going to think this is too wacky and wide. And
Right.
it ended up being one of the two favorite modules that we taught in the program. And out of those, so these 5,000 people were taught in small groups over a number of years. And I say maybe twice out of all those trainings did somebody not speak up and tell me a story of how this type of intuition had literally saved their life, or was a serious enough example that it maybe not their life, but serious harm's way type thing. So this is well known in the first responder military type circles. In fact, there's a lot of stories out of Vietnam and stuff, that era, even, way back when, and research done around that. So this is a lot of people have personal experience of it if they really stop and think about it and are honest. And like another classic example in the 3D world here is driving. If I'm in a group I got to pull nails from, so to speak, as I say it, to get them to talk, which isn't very often. But so how many of you have been had an experience where you're driving and it's a street or a road you've been down maybe thousands of times, hometown, right? You're really familiar with it, but for some reason, on a particular occasion, you slowed down before you went over a hill, around a curve or something, right, that you normally don't. And sure enough, there was the child running out in the street, or an accident, or something that was going on. Had you not slowed down, you probably would have been in trouble. And about everybody raises their hand. But we didn't slow down the other gazillion times we made that path, right? So and a lot of people aren't even conscious that they're doing it in the moment, right, until after the fact. So those are kind of 3D examples of non-local intuition. Now, so this I kind of alluded to, that we've developed very rigorous lab-based protocols to measure.
Yeah, exactly. Share that. Yeah.
Okay.
Please share that, because I think people are like, how do you study this? And
so we've developed several protocols over the years. The first one is basically the way that the experimental work set up is. The experiment is, you've got a person sitting at a computer screen, kind of like we are now, right? But we got electrodes all over them. We're measuring their brain waves and their electrocardiograms and their skin conductance and some other physiological measures and so on. So basically, they press a button that starts the experimental sequence, and they're sitting there looking at a blank screen, for up to 20 seconds in some protocols. Typically, the first experiments are around 6 seconds. Then meanwhile, we're recording all that data, your brain waves and your heart rhythms and all the stuff. At a certain point in the future, then after you push the button and we've collected this data, the computer, it then randomly selects a photograph that it's going to show you. Okay, so nobody can know what that future picture is going to be. The computer doesn't even know till the data is already collected. That's truly a randomized process.
Wow.
That grabs a photo, and they're counterbalanced in a way that you can't start guessing what might even come up. I mean, I won't go into all the rigor. It's all published for people that want the gory details, but it's not out. You have to for these kind of experiments. But Basically, it shows you a picture from the two extreme ends of what's called the International Affective Picture Set. So these are photographs that have been well researched to know what type of emotion they typically elicit in a person that sees them and the intensity of that emotion. Okay, so it's on one end of that scale, you've got bunny rabbits and nature scenes and things like that, flower pots. And the other end of the scale, you've got bad guys with knives at a woman's throat and car accidents and snakes striking you at the screen and pretty edgy stuff.
Right.
About as edgy as you want to go in some of those. But so you get the idea. You got some that are very negative, emotionally evocative, and some that are kind of neutral and calming. So what we found, because we were really it was a pretty in-depth study, these first studies, but let me just summarize what we found there is that in people who don't have a lot of history with meditation practices and coherence training and so on, that you will actually, in the skin conductance, you'll see a response in the period before you see the picture. Okay, that's different between the calm and the emotional pictures. But in the HRV, we call the heart data, the electrocardiogram and what's called the heart HRV or heart rate variability data, you see a huge effect in both, especially in people who've practiced some self-regulation or self-awareness training. But you don't see a skin conductance response in the pre-stimulus period.
Oh, wow.
I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Because it's really fascinating to really trace that down, the reason for that. So basically what I'm saying here is that depending upon the experimental protocol, how long you leave between the beginning of the protocol and when you see the picture.
Right.
Usually right when you start the protocol, you see especially the heart rhythms diverge in a way that is predictive of what the future picture is going to be.
Wow.
Okay.
Got it.
Right. So the heart is predicting. Now, what was really amazing when we were looking at all the brain waves,
right,
that the heart rhythms diverged and predicted before you saw any type of change in brainwave data.
I got it. The brain, I just got chills.
So heart first.
Heart first.
Then we're actually using techniques called heartbeat evoked potentials, where we can actually trace the flow of information flowing up the nerves from the heart to the brain. We can actually measure that and how those neural signals, what are called afferent or ascending neural signals, when and where they come into the brain and how they flow in time and location through the brain. Okay, so those are kind of advanced techniques we use to trace all that. Right. So here's the bottom line. Heart shifts first, sends a measurably different neural signal to the brain, right? Then some seconds after the heart shifts, you see significant changes in the brain occur, especially the frontal areas, right, but not just the frontal areas, frontal cortex. Okay, so heart first sends a measurably different signal to the brain. Then you get a brain response down into the body.
Is that when the gut, people talk about gut feeling?
Yes, that's when you see the skin conductance responses or the gut feeling, the hair on the back of the neck. Okay, so it's that body change, third step, where if we're assuming we're paying attention, that it becomes conscious, the gut feeling. Right? Yeah. You feel it there. So the gut is more of what we call an effector organ. It doesn't have much coming upstairs, but it's really affected by what's coming from the brain down to it. That's why you feel like you get punched in the gut if you have a big emotional upset or that kind of thing. So does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So heart, brain, body, and then if you're paying attention, it becomes a conscious perception and feeling. So the gut gets the credit, but it's really heart, brain, body.
Yeah. So this is interesting because I think going back to a little bit of the safe, we've been focusing on the brain, and it's like, what I love about what you're doing in HeartMath, it's like, no, the heart is first. We need to study the heart first. It's actually guiding the brain. If I heard you correctly.
Yeah, well, in this context, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, so basically, to summarize what I just said is if a future event is emotionally relevant. Now that's critical to this.
Okay. Got it.
We have to care about it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Right.
After all, as a mom, you're tuned into your kids,
Right.
not the other however many billion
Yeah,
kids. What a
not so
mess
much.
that would be, right?
I could not handle that.
Yeah, nobody could. So even in these experimental protocols, we see exactly that as well.
I see.
So the pictures that are more in the future picture, if it's one that really gets us,
Yep.
you get a much bigger pre-stimulus signal than you do if it's one that doesn't really affect us much.
Can I ask a
Yeah,
quick question?
sure.
So I'm thinking for those, I'm highly sensitive to images. And so I don't do a lot of watching the news. I'm very, very affected by
Good for you.
pictures. Like I read black and white, old school, like on, just about what's going on with no pictures.
I do the same thing, actually.
Yeah, I can't. And I've actually, it's funny because I have the heart coherence, the thing that you.
Hopefully you're using the global coherence app, but the pulse sensor, yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed this with certain people, but especially I just tried to test it. Like I noticed it shifts my coherence, my heart rate variability, the waves, and so it's just making me think. I know you've talked about this, but for those listening, like it's a real thing, how we're affected by pictures and the media and videos and what we're watching. And I've known this intuitively or in my body, but to see it, it was really fascinating to see it plummeted my coherence. And I got to tell you, I even taking my kids to the movies, like certain movies that you would think are like PG-13, I can't watch. I mean, it's just, but most of us aren't paying attention to that. And the impact is huge. Yeah.
True.
Just a note, like,
well, and this is, so the way I'll just tell you a little bit of the way the first studies we did around this non-local intuition, this lab-based study, I forget the year, but it was late 90s when we first started publishing some of that work. I mean, it's been a while ago now. And the way that I was able to get it published in peer-reviewed scientific journals, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about, in fact, it was called, I think, The Electrophysiology of Intuition, I think were the titles of those first studies. And so basically what we said is it appears that the heart and brain, because it was also pre-stimulus just after the heart, have access to a field of information outside the boundaries of time and space.
Mm.
No problem. Perfectly acceptable language.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because at that time, things like non-locality and entanglement had been experimentally proven. And
sure.
Yeah. So this was all. But at that time, that was only supposed to be at subatomic scales.
Right.
Shoot photons and electrons off. Now, since then, even in the quantum physics world, that's been extended into the macroscopic world of whole atoms and whole groups of atoms and so on.
Right.
But here we were showing it in hot, wet, messy organs like hearts and brains, right? But anyway, we were able to get that published. And so in later years, we published more on this and developed other protocols. I won't go into all that now, but where we had 2 pre-stimulus periods and confirmed all the stuff I've been sharing with you, as have others as well. But I'm a little more out of the box myself now of, well, think about it. What is a field of information outside the boundaries of time and space?
Yeah.
Right.
How do you define that?
Well, I mean, if I ask that question, I get all kinds of answers. Oh, it's the quantum, it's this, it's that. Well, my simple answer is it's how I started our conversation with. It's that larger part of ourself. That is our heart intelligence. It exists in another dimension. Yeah. It's a real thing with real structure, and like a radio communication down into this dimension through the energetic heart. I mean, it's really what I'm saying there. So it really is our larger self, right? What a lot of people would call your higher self, your spirit, your soul, and so on. Yeah. Which we can tease apart differences there, but so it's this intuitive intelligence. It's that reacts. It's operated in another domain outside of time and space. So that's as we access that, that's why our consciousness and awareness is expanded. Yeah. And we suddenly start having information about future and space and things because we're operating from another domain there of intuitive intelligence. So hopefully that kind of summarizes a lot of work into what I'm a little more willing to say these days, but what I really mean by that.
Yeah. It's fantastic. I'm managing myself. I have a lot of questions, but I think one of the things, well, what I'm hearing, I kind of get these questions that I think people listening would be asking, and that's Okay, so because you have, what I love about what you're doing is there's real science, empirical data. You've done research that shows this. It's not just, oh, follow your heart. Like it actually backs that up. Um, how can those that are, anyone listening, anyone that wants to have a deeper connection to their higher self, to their intuition, what are ways that you have seen that work to do that?
Great question. I'm glad you asked that. So I'm going to go back to those studies. So in those studies I was just describing,
Right.
where we measured all this, we actually had our participants. These were big, long studies. Like the first one, we had 30 people, and we had them go through that protocol twice. Right. So these are long. It takes a year or so to conduct one of these studies. So one time they just came into the lab. We were kind of like we normally would be. Hi, how you doing? Let's go get you wired up. It takes a while, and on with it we go. Right. So the second time that they would, well, sometimes it was first time, it was all counterbalanced and mixed, but one of the times that they would go through it, we would actually get them wired up. Then we would have them do what we call a heart lock-in, which I'm sure you remember. In fact, we did one together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you really shift into a heart coherent state, a heart rhythm coherent state, and really activate energetically, a renewing feeling. It might be appreciation or kindness, that really helps align us at a much deeper energetic level. So we had them do that for a few minutes before the protocol. And what do you think what do you think there was a difference in the physiological data? That's probably an unfair question, but.
Yeah, I mean, just from what we did, and what I like is you can see this coherence. You can see it on the app, the difference. So absolutely.
Right, but we also saw measurable differences in that pre-stimulus work. Right. So it was a pretty strong effect. It wasn't subtle. So being coherent first, it's simple. I'll say it in the kind of a people-friendly way. It opened up that channel between the heart and brain. Yeah. So you saw a lot larger, faster modulations of the frontal cortex, especially in that pre-stimulus period.
Amazing. From the heart lock-in.
Yeah, if you went through these experimental protocols after the heart lock-in, after doing the short lock-in. So basically, to answer your question, there's some very practical things we can do to increase our access to really all three types of intuition, because they're all real, right? And they're all important, and some people are more grounded or more might have more of one type and less of the others, and and so on. But we can really learn to increase all three because they're all to our benefit.
Yep.
So the probably first and most important thing is learning to shift into a coherent state regularly to quiet the mental chatter, and emotional unrest. Yeah. The language of intuition is usually emotions for most people. It's feelings. It felt like I should do it or shouldn't do it, or this feels right, or this, it's when people talk about it, it's how they talk about it. Yeah. So, there's a lot of sayings, the still small voice of the heart and in our language and stuff. So I would suggest it's not so still and it's not so small. Yeah. It's actually loud if we pay attention to it. It's just that the mental and emotional mind chatter is so loud. Yep. That it drowns out our deeper inner voice. Yep. Right. So by getting coherent, learning the practices of shifting into coherence helps quieten that noise. So that's one step of why coherence is so important, but it's also opening that energetic channel, kind of like tuning the radio station, right? I use an analogy sometimes. You may not be old enough to remember this, but I'm from an era back when we actually used to have turn knobs on radios to tune the station in.
Oh, yeah. We had those.
Yeah, you had those too.
We did.
Right. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like tuning our inner radio knob. Yeah. To the channel of because our larger self is always there. It never goes away. Yeah. We get detuned. Right. So coherence tunes us to our own inner channel. Right. Make sense?
100%. Yeah.
So that's and then the second most important aspect, if you want to increase it, is learning to pay attention to our intuitive feelings and perceptions. Now that may sound like but that is so important. I can't overemphasize how important that is. Yeah. We didn't do it down at the Global Coherence event in Cancun, or Tulum, but I can actually show you there's fun ways of actually proving that the way our brain works is we literally only perceive what we are paying attention to.
Hmm.
So we get so many intuitive promptings that we just never hear simply because we aren't paying attention to what the
Yes.
body actually told us in the heart.
Yes. You had mentioned early, and I'm so in alignment with this. This is why I wanted to do 3 episodes on this because, you had said that the biggest cause of stress is really what you could boil it down to is we're not paying attention to our heart. We're out of coherence. We're out of alignment. And to me, that's I think about the future and what we're trying to build and the vision, and it's how do we get people to pay attention more? That's kind of the $1 million question. Although I think mindfulness meditation, obviously what HeartMath is doing, but you got to have a quality of attention to even hear it.
To the heart, right? So I mean, I practiced mindfulness for years, and I'm a supporter. I think anything that helps people become more self-aware is great, and I'm a champion.
Yeah.
But at some time, I think this will evolve into heartfulness, to be honest.
Oh, I love it.
Because it's really the heart, and even within the mindfulness communities, they're starting to integrate more and talk more about the heart.
I love that.
And self-regulation, even in that community, because you can't help it almost what's happening on the planet. Julie, from my perspective, the shift that everybody's talking about, really is the shift from just total mind-based consciousness to one that's now integrated and uplifted with the integration of the heart intelligence, right? So so that's why we, in our techniques, really have people focus in the area of the heart.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons, but physiological, but to really shift into that coherent state. Is from us, the big game here is of course it's about reducing stress and flowing through life, but it's really more ultimately about how do we elevate global consciousness in a rapid, meaningful way that can happen globally. So I mean, everybody has a heart, and it's their portal to their own larger self, and their particular blueprints and life geometries, and so.
Well, before we wrap up, first of all, it just hit me. I don't know how I never thought of this, but brilliant what you just said. Mindfulness. I had never put that into context. We're still in the mind versus heartfulness. I mean, I know it's like, hello, it's so obvious, but that is actually, I think, a needed switch. I'd like to just start calling it heartfulness. That is really maybe.
Well, that's fine because because it really is a focus from mind and observing. And again,
sure, it's needed as well.
You need that. You've got to be self-aware. Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
I really am a champion, but then I think we can also evolve beyond just the observation into the self-regulation but self-regulation by aligning with our heart intuitive guidance.
Brilliant.
Not because somebody said we should, or a preacher or a doctor or a psychologist or something, because of our own innate internal intelligence, knowing that that's the best for us and the humanity. And we haven't even gone into how that affects the global field. But
I guess to wrap up for now, and Dr. McCraty, if you're open, maybe we'll do round 2 with more the global aspect. I am curious, when you think about, I know you've added incredible research and work to the world through HeartMath. What is your vision with HeartMath? If you're, painting that picture?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And it's really about helping facilitate the shift to a globally coherent world. Yeah. And that, I'm going to, if I just take a second here, you might remember we did an exercise down at the Global Coherence event down in Tulum.
Yeah.
Around that. And I realized with hindsight that exercise, that most of the people in it weren't able to really grasp what we were asking in that exercise. I don't know if you observed that or not. The question we asked them was to envision what would a globally coherent world look and feel like. Right? That was the exercise. And it was a long process that John led us through there to do that.
Right.
Most of the presentations around that were how you do it, what might work, but very few, if any, really was able to articulate what that world would look like. And so I learned something there, and I've asked that a few times.
Mm.
And let me, what I wish I would have done, or if I do it again, I think I would want to help people a little bit. So I used to say, Julie, that because I'd read this in a couple places, that with 10% of the world's military budgets, that you could feed, house, educate, have clean water, etc., for every man, woman, and child on planet Earth. 10% of the world's military budget.
Right.
I was actually wrong. In fact, I actually met not too long ago the person who's really done the work and has now been nominated for a couple Nobel Peace Prizes, actually, in her book Blueprint for Peace, or Business Plan for Peace. I was wrong in that it's far less than 10%.
Oh, I got chills when you said
It's far less than 10% of the world's military budget could do that. And that being true, that's not a what if, that's actually true. I mean,
right.
So this is a problem in consciousness.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, come on. So for a tenth of what we spend, less than a tenth of what we spend on bombs and killing people, we could house, feed, educate, which would really solve pretty much most of the 3D problems we have, just that.
Right.
But imagine what we could do with the other 90%. Right?
It's like, yeah.
Right. So that helps, I think, people get out of the box. No, it reminds me of something that Doc Childrey, the founder of HeartMath, told me many years ago, actually, around when we first met, about really being able to access the elevation that heart intelligence really is bringing to the global shift down the road once we really make that shift.
Right.
He said it's like this. He said if you can imagine, if you could time travel back a few thousand years, and just show up, and here was a group of people coming out of the caves and whip out a Bic lighter and flick it. Right? What that would be like for them.
Yeah.
They're still rubbing sticks together and somebody flicks a blick.
Right.
So if you ask them to imagine what the next level of consciousness would look like, there's no way they could do it.
Yeah.
You follow what I mean? So it's the same thing. So he was using that kind of analogy of the shift that we're really here going through now.
Yeah.
Well, that's a long-winded answer to your question, but
no, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. I'm so grateful for you that you exist, that HeartMath exists, for what we talked about, for this research, for the work being done to shift, to start this global shift. I mean, it to me is the most important thing for our planet. It really is. This conversation, it brings tears to my eyes because I don't know, as a sensitive empath, I can feel it. I can feel the collective, the stress and the disengagement. It's palpable. I mean, I do a lot to stay in a coherent place, but I can feel it. And it's to hear that less than 10% of the military budget could change the planet in that way. I mean, it's just, to me, this is worth doing anything possible for the rest of my hopefully long life and our life. And I just, this is a very important topic, and I'm just really grateful to you for what you've shared here. It's a lot of important information.
Yeah. So if I may just add one last thing, then
please. And then any books you'd recommend, because I love having
sure.
a couple books.
Sure. I mean, the latest book that I'm a co-author on with Doc Childrey and a couple of my colleagues, Debbie and Howard, actually, who you mentioned, is called Heart Intelligence.
Yeah, excellent book.
If you want more of the sciencey stuff, kind of a scientific American level write-up, that's also a book called Science of the Heart, Volume 2.
Okay.
And that's got chapters on not only intuition, but also the energetic field environments of the earth and heart rate, heart-brain communication, and many chapters in it. But it's more of a science book. So I would do that. But what I was going to say, Julie, is that I think for the shift that I think many of us are here to help facilitate. I know that's as I wake up to who I am, that's what my work is about, and why I do what I do, and why I walked away from a multi-million-dollar business that I had started to do this work. But it's two levels to me that are important. One is in fact, I have so much appreciation for the 8,000 plus HeartMath trainers that have gotten certified in HeartMath, who are taking the actual practical tools and techniques of how we actually learn to self-regulate more from our hearts and intuitive guidance, and shift into coherence. and in day-to-day life, right? Because it's not as hard as it seems when people have simple, practical well thought out tools and techniques to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big gaps, I think, that's not taught to anyone. I wasn't taught that. It's not taught in our schools. And,
No.
So we're just left from, repeating the same cycles. So that's it's so important, I think, actually giving people the actual skills. Then we have to be meaningful about practicing them, of course. Nothing's going to work if we don't use it. But so getting that information into so many areas of society, whether it's children through schools, in our work in law enforcement and first responders, to the general public, hospitals, doctors, all the different areas, that we work in. But then there's also the energetic side. And that's where the global coherence and what the whole thing in Tulum was really about, is the energetic emissions. Because whatever we are, again, this is the whole interview, but I'll say it briefly, but what we are feeling, whether that's kindness and appreciation and care and compassion, or if it's overwhelm and frustration and anxiety because we didn't get our to-do list done.
Yeah.
That all counts. And that's actually definitely, clearly, we know for sure, measurably feeding our personal field environment and affecting those around us. But it's also coupling with, we're suggesting, the Earth's bigger field. And what's making me want to say this is what you just shared with me about your own experience of feeling the planetary stress.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're all feeding the field, right? And this is the side that I think I don't like to make predictions, but it's one I'll make, is that in the unfolding years, that will become more understood, even maybe not by the mainstream scientists, but more and more people are already onto that.
Right.
And even mainstream scientists, it'll finally become so clear that what we're feeding the field is so critical. So we need both. We need the down here on Earth, actually in the trenches, helping people learn how to do this, because that's changing what everybody's feeding the field, right? So it's a collective kind of big information, computer, if you will, at the field level. And as more of us are learning to feed the field more love, care, kindness, that puts a more coherent signal into the global field environment, which helps more and more people wake up. And as more and more people wake up and become coherent, that signal becomes stronger and more stable and coherent. So it's a ripple effect. So I guess my call to action here to our listeners would be, hey, take some pauses throughout the day and tune in. What am I feeding the field?
Right. Awesome. It's so powerful. And for those who are interested in HeartMath practitioners, I know that at heartmath.com you can find
.org.
HeartMath.org. Yeah.
So there's two HeartMaths. That's probably worth understanding. There's heartmath.com, which does the commercial activities. And there's heartmath.org, which is the research. And we really are separate organizations. We have separate campuses, leadership and staff. So the nonprofit is really not under the wing of the for-profit. So we are really independent. And we both create programs. The nonprofit focuses more on providing programs in the technology, which we don't, the .com manufactures the technology, but we also sell it for schools, education. So the .org works with other .orgs, .govs, so we do the work with law enforcement, social service agencies, families, parenting, that type of thing, where the .org, the .com does more what you would expect the .com, that it works with hospitals and doctors and, corporations and that type of thing. So
amazing.
But we appreciate when people do come to our sites and stuff, because that's what funds the research and stuff, if you're going to get a device and also we've developed I almost forgot, I can't believe this, under the nonprofit side, the .org, a new app called the Global Coherence app, because that's where the Global Coherence Project is housed, is within the nonprofit. So this allows us to measure the group or the community's coherence and track how much coherent heart energy we are both individually and collectively adding to the global field environment. And so that's an awesome new app that I know you're familiar with.
I use it almost every single morning. It's incredible. You can see what the coherence is of the global coherence and yours with it. It's awesome.
And a map, and I love the map. It shows you where others are around the world.
Yeah.
I look at it. Oh, look, there's somebody in Turkey and somebody
we're doing it together.
Jamaica and all the places they are in Japan. And
so awesome.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, I I love what you said about pausing and asking, what am I feeding the field? I think is how you said it. Thankful to, I'll do a little shout out to John Berghoff through Exchange and connecting us, and through that facilitation work that I've got involved with him that brought us to you guys. I have to say I've been into what HeartMath is about for many years, and just grateful. I mean, what you said, this is why I do this podcast, right? We're trying to get as much heart coherence into this world and beyond. And I just really, I don't even have the words to say how grateful I am for you and honor who you are. You're stepping away from a multi-million dollar other business experience to do this. And it's this, I believe this is what's going to help change the world. This is one of the important aspects.
Well, me too, obviously. I mean, there's a whole backstory to that, but maybe
sure.
I'll talk about that.
Yeah. We'll have to do round 2. Dr. McCraty, I'm like, all right, so at some point we're going to talk later. If you're open to it, I got to bring it back. So many questions.
Always. Yeah.
Well, and I thank you for what you're bringing to the world. And this was an incredible deep dive into intuition and how our hearts really, I mean, it's real. It's a real thing, the intelligence.
Yeah, the poets have been, and the philosophers have been right all along.
Right.
Some of the,
exactly.
Actually, just on that, a fellow that used to be the head of our education division, Professor Bob Reis, the man that literally has 3 Ph.D s. He was a professor at UCLA and retired, and then went to work for us. And one of his passions was a religious scholar of really studying the world's religions.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, I have to see if I can track that down. But what he found in his work very clearly was that the single most common denominator amongst all of the great world's religions, whether it's Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, I mean, and the list goes on, is the single factor is that they all regard the heart as the seat of intelligence, and by which we access deeper wisdom and inner guidance. That's common to every single major religion on planet Earth. And the other thing I learned from them is what was actually said in I forget the name of it now, the oldest known writing to ever be discovered actually discusses the heart as a source of intelligence.
Wow.
So we're not discovering something new here.
No.
We're just giving people practical tools to access it and putting some science behind it as well.
Fantastic. Well, from my heart to yours, to every heart that's tuning in, thank you.
My pleasure. As always, Julie.